Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Going to talk about a lot of things today that are potentially that you could potentially relate to. Are you somebody that would describe yourself as a perfectionist? Maybe you know somebody, or if you're somebody that just works a lot, I'm a workaholic. I can't stop working. I want to make sure everybody's happy in my life. Or are you not so happy? Looking for that happiness versus the pleasure. We're going to look into that as well. And she's somebody that can totally help us out with that. She's a nurse, but also somebody that heals people through many different modalities. And Anju Redheendran is back with us on the program. Anju, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you, Steve?
I'm well. It's great to have you back with us. And I always say this, and I'm going to say it again for anybody that hasn't heard it, but I love the name of what you do, being a mindset strategist. And you're also the founder, and the website is ICU-1111.com. ICU Intensive Care Unit, which is your background, and 1111, because when we see that on a clock, just happened again this morning, right away, I have to make a wish. And we all have a wish, that we want maybe even move our lives forward or wish for those things that could make life that much better. So where do you want to begin? Do you want to talk about how we turn into those perfectionists, those workaholics?
Yes. So workaholics, people pleasers, and perfectionists all come from different yet similar wounds. Workaholics are people who want to establish their sense of significance through doing, right? So the wound is, I'm not really worth it. That's the wound that they're trying to resolve. So they want to do anything in their power to be seen, to be noticed, to be helpful, to be useful. And so when they're not, then they kind of have to face that pain. So that's the first thing. Perfectionists are people who felt that they were not good enough as they are. So our need for acceptance and a sense of belonging is central to a healthy life, a healthy spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical life. And if we don't get that, then we end up trying to prove ourselves. And we do anything in our power to make sure we are just right enough to be loved. And that's when we become doers versus beers, human doings versus human beings. And then people pleasers are people who are generally born into families and found themselves in situations where their truth couldn't necessarily be spoken. So they couldn't feel free to be who they needed to be. So they chose acceptance over authenticity.
Completely can relate to that, even personally. And I'm going to share something. I don't think I talked about this last time about the perfectionism thing, but I found an article that was in a local newspaper when I was 17. I used to draw cartoons, was going to be a syndicated cartoonist, and kind of pivoted, and right after that, doing what I'm doing right now. And what happened at that time was the article talks about me saying that I'm a perfectionist. And and the reason for that was I was always bullied as a kid. So what you just said, Anju, is so 100% true, that I didn't feel I was good enough. So even I could even just in that room right there could take that article and show it to you. And it's a quote for me that says, I'm a perfectionist. And I lived my life that way up until about 5-10 years ago, where I kind of weaned off of that, realizing that, why am I doing this? I don't need to be perfect. I do the best I can. And I think that is more than good enough. But we get in those habits. And like you said, there's a reason for it. It goes back to something.
Yeah. And it's funny because perfectionists, before we realize it's a wound, we take pride in being a perfectionist. Like, if you give it to us, it'll be done with perfection. But what we're really trying to say, it'll be done with excellence or precision.
Yes.
That's another way. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be done well.
But it's also, you go over the top because you want to overplease people.
Yes.
And maybe just even make yourself look and feel better because of a reason, whatever that reason is. And that was my reason. I was bullied, and I always felt that maybe I wasn't good enough. But it's so funny we were talking about this, because I literally found that article like a week ago.
Everything happens for a reason.
You know what? That is my mantra. Every single day I say that because things pop up and it's 100%. It happens for a reason. How do you get out of that people pleasing perfectionist workaholic mode?
Well, you have to first realize that they are wounds. These are core wounds.
Yeah.
And so um, to understand and take a look at what it is you're avoiding. So for me, I was avoiding not feeling good enough in just being authentically me.
Mhm.
Okay, so when, especially coming from two different families, I had a family of origination and then a family that took me in and raised me. So when that change happens, I didn't feel any particular need to be a certain way with my family of origination. Then when I got taken into this family, I was like, oh no, I have to preserve my sense of belonging. And um, so I did what I could to wear a mask that made me more palatable or acceptable to this family, even though it wasn't necessarily who I innately was. So our pain causes us to do lots of things and branch out. Actually, it kind of creates, makes us be creative too, because I created a mask. That's another way to look at it. I was able to morph and be a chameleon when I needed to preserve my safety when I didn't necessarily feel safe. So the workaholic was I had to prove myself worthy of love. Like I'm a useful, lovable person. So I had to do the best, be the best, approach everything where to the point of perfection, like it has to be done exceptionally well, not just well. And so most secure people are fine doing things well. And that's where perfectionists differ. We are insecure. That's the one. We are insecure because we don't know any other way to be okay with ourselves.
You use,
Once I realized, huh?
I just want, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh,
Are all perfectionists insecure? Do you think so?
I think perfectionism comes from not feeling good enough, which makes us feel insecure. So,
Hmm.
long story short, yes, that's what I personally believe.
You know, I saw a Billy Joel concert last week, and there's a song called The Stranger from his album The Stranger. And I just looked up the lyrics, and just what you said about the mask. We all have a face that we hide away forever and we take them out and show ourselves. So it's almost like we all have different masks, but we're kind of like strangers to ourselves and other people because we're not really being us. We're putting on
Yeah.
maybe a show, the perfectionist show. I'm the workaholic show. It's not really
Mhm.
the genuine you. You're not really living your genuine life.
Yes. And here's something to consider. Even the dark aspects of human nature, we all contain those things. Like just because someone's a murderer or a burglar doesn't mean we couldn't do the same things if the conditions were right. We just choose not to. Or really that hasn't had an opportunity to surface. Like, what if someone's attacking my family? I may end up having to murder someone out of protection as a human to my child. That's not considered, I mean, but that's still murder, right? We're like, oh, I'm not capable of murder, but you haven't necessarily been in that situation to show that dark side of yourself, let that surface.
I totally.
So anything is kind of possible with anyone.
You know what, Anju,
Uh,
I don't want to agree with you, but I agree with you. And I've seen it in my circles. I've lived it, not me personally, but yeah, people who you think are this can be 180 that over there. And somehow
mhm,
it comes out. Could be something triggered it. Who knows whatever it is, but this was not
yeah.
what you thought it was.
Yeah, like pastors and things like that. I watch Oxygen Channel all the time and see stories about like families, like even religious people, right? Pastors. They get themselves into trouble, but they're using their position of power
Mhm.
to, mitigate some of this. But the fact is, they're still acting in a low human energy form,
Yep.
right? They still have these basic needs and desires that they're pursuing. And, it's human nature. It's not anyone is immune to any part of the process of being human. But here's the other thing I wanted to talk about. If we saw a person who is um, like physically disabled or has some physical disfiguration going on, we know that they've been through something, right? But for these types of things, workaholics, perfectionists, and people pleasers, you can't look at someone and know that they went through a trauma, emotional trauma, mental trauma, spiritual trauma, to know that they're suffering through something.
Mhm.
So this is what I wanted to talk about. This is my weird thought that I had. What if we look like our emotional wounds? What would we look like? And I can give you an example of what I think I would look like.
You just made me think, like, I love how you're so real, and it's almost like you start peeling back layers, and make us think. Um, I'm thinking about it. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's say, and this is how I am kind of defining things, like your mother represents your first person who introduces you to your identity, your feeling of worthiness and belonging, right? So that's your face. So your face is either covered, disfigured, poured with acid or something like that when you don't get something like that to happen. And you'll notice this. Okay, so this is a metaphor, right? You're kind of like a faceless person, or you're someone that we don't want to look at some people that have these, disfigurations and stuff like that, because it's hard to look at. And that's so it makes us feel uncomfortable. But if we think about this metaphorically, um, there are some very beautiful people out there. And you're like, what kind of problems could they have? But then you talk to them and you give them a compliment. You're like, wow, you're pretty. And they're like, really? You think so? And they just have a different response than you would have thought that they
Mhm.
should have had, because yeah, you're like, you're clearly a nice looking person. Why are you acting like that? Like it's something weird, because in their mind, their experience of their life has been to not really have an identity, have a face, feel worthy and accepted.
I've met both of
Isn't
those people in the last couple of weeks. Not even kidding. I went
uh,
to a dog park last weekend, and there was a gentleman there walking his dog, and he clearly had gone through a fire. I didn't say anything, but to your point, it was almost hard to look at him in the face because I didn't know how to react. And he was the nicest guy in the world, and our dogs played and everything, but it was just, I was a little uncomfortable, but I wasn't. But then on
yeah.
the other side, and you know what it was? I wanted him to be comfortable, but I'm not sure how to approach it. And then the other side, just what you're saying. I know a couple, and they are Barbie and Ken, most wonderful people in the world. You look at them and you're like, "Oh, what could be wrong with your life?" If you knew their backstory, both of them individually and even together, um, it would blow your mind. You would never, not even for a second, think that they had been through what they've been through, and they've got through it and they're moving through it. But yeah, what you see is not really what is.
Hmm. And then, so like that's what I'm relating the mother wounds to, like your face, your arms, because you embrace life with your arms.
Mm.
And then your father represents your stability and protection. So that's like your skin, your bones, your ability to stand on your feet, things like that. Then, um, so okay, so then I'm just going to paint my own picture, and then you can do this to yourself based on your own wounds. I just want everyone to think about this who's listening. So I lost my biological mother when I was 6, and so with that, it was like I was in a major car accident and my face got disfigured to the point where I was hard to look at. And then in that same accident, my arms were broken. So I couldn't really embrace life like I used to. And I needed a lot of to help trying to make sense of my life. Then I lost my biological father a year later to suicide. Now, since it's suicide, this was an option for him. Like he chose to do it. So I liken it to I was in another major car accident a year later, and I got a crush injury to my leg. Now they could have maybe saved my leg,
Mm.
but the decision was made to amputate it. So then that was taken from me, the leg. So far, what I look like is disfigured in the face, and then bilateral arms broken and one leg gone. So now I get a new mother. My new mother at the time, well, she still is, 19 years older than me. So she's really young, and I'm 6 and 7 years old, coming into this new life. So she's very young, and she wasn't ready. She wasn't really willing or emotionally capable of taking on two. My brother was 11 and he was 12 and I was 7. That's a lot for a very young mid-20s person. And so she had to take on 2 kids that were not her own. So basically, to me, getting a mom that I knew felt this way, felt like after that injury, I had an ill-fitting mask, a prosthetic, to make myself look more presentable and normal. And I had to wear excessive amounts of makeup to be palatable. And then with my new father, he was my support. He was like my prosthetic leg with a titanium frame. He gave me a lot of strength, a lot of support. And if I wore pants or something that covered my legs, you would not really know necessarily that, this had happened. Like I had this injury to my leg and it was below the knee amputation or something. But then, and I don't have the same sensations or responses to injury that other people have because part of that leg is gone. And so another difference is I became very strong. So he helped me survive. And then he trained me like an Olympian to live life. He pushed me hard to face things, to kick things, to be an athlete in life. So I was like an Olympian for the Paralympics in soccer or something with my leg. That's how he trained me. He's like, don't let anyone feel sorry for you. Yes, you lost your parents, but you gained another set of parents. We are here taking care of you now. If anyone says to you, oh, poor thing, ask them, are you going to take care of me? No, they're not. You have parents that are taking care of you. He's like, keep that in mind. I said, okay. So I liken him to a prosthetic leg. And here's the other thing about that. After I got this strength from my father and his guidance and his support, it's like when someone tried to kick me in the leg, it would only end up hurting them more. That's another benefit of having a prosthetic leg because they don't know what's underneath. Okay.
Wow.
So then, okay, now this is one that's kind of a little harder pill to swallow, but a lot of women, especially I know men and women have been through this, but I'm speaking from a woman's perspective. That's like secret sexual abuse that happens and, between family, friends, and things like that. So that happened to me, and that leaves you feeling exposed and hypersensitive. So that version of that, my spiritual version of that, was the skin of both my arms was burned down to the muscle. So I don't know if you've ever had a burn, but anytime like wind passes over a burn, it hurts. It's sensitive, and you're like jumpy too, and very just hypersensitive because your first layer of protection is gone. So my arms were extremely sensitive, and anyone walking by would affect it. The remedy for this was for me telling my father, because he was my skin, he was my bones for when I was a child. And so I told him what was going on, and he had the best reaction in my mind because he got mad. He got so mad on my behalf. And when you tell someone that, something bad happened in your life, that is the best reaction. That is the only thing you could hope for, that they empathize with you, that they're like, oh, I'm so mad. I should have been there to protect you. And that's what he said. And he couldn't, because he did we had so many restrictions on our life as it was. And despite all of those restrictions, this still happened. So he was beating himself up. I was like, you don't need to beat yourself up. It's just something that happened. But to know that he cared so intensely about my well-being, that was my skin graft.
Wow. I know we got deep here, but that's super cool in terms of comparing that. And it just makes us think. Like, I'm already thinking as I'm listening to you what I would look like. And I'm sure the rest of us are thinking the same exact thing. I would, I didn't have any. I didn't have any legs. My parents got divorced almost before I was born, and
Yeah.
my dad really wasn't there to support me. I later learned he passed when I was like 21. I learned I was a lot like him after he passed, but
Oh,
through being bullied and all that during when I was in elementary school and even junior high, kind of wasn't really there for me. So I didn't have any legs,
yeah.
or I was missing one. Uh,
Yeah.
my mom was great, a little overprotective, so I'm not really sure what my face would look like. I guess it would be okay. Um, makes you think. Wow, what we
Yeah. Well, I couldn't recognize myself. Like my identity was gone in my situation. A lot
sure.
of people, they just kind of have like a veil or a mask over them, or their skin is kind of melted, like in their spiritual version of themselves. So they can't see themselves. But usually if you have a strong relationship, or like a unbroken relationship with your mom, then your identity's pretty much intact, and then the people that attack it are later on in life, like
Yeah.
kids in school and things like that. But the other thing, there's three other things that I wanted to talk about. So I got kicked out my freshman year of college. So that was shame, loss of reputation, and made me feel not good enough. And the physical spiritual manifestation of that was like I lost some teeth. And so I'm like toothless, not completely toothless, just a couple of teeth. But then my remedy for this was this is where the overachiever kind of comes in, because then I ended up getting a bachelor's of science in nursing, and then a master's degree in business, and then a master's pending in medical informatics. So I overdid it. That was my overcompensation.
You know what?
So
Can I
that's my dental implants.
can I jump in for a second here?
Yeah.
Was that so bad that you did that you overcompensated because you went from getting kicked out, but look what you did with your life. So
Yeah.
if you didn't, Anju, if you didn't overcompensate at that time for being kicked out of college,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think would have happened if you didn't?
If I didn't overcompensate, oh no, I would have. My dad gave me two options: sink or swim. I would have been sinking for sure. I would have been going in a downward spiral, down some drain, emotional drain somewhere.
So when we think about, and I put it into the context of perfectionism or workaholic, kind of somewhere
Uh-huh.
there, wasn't a bad thing that you did that at that time because you were able to swim. You move forward.
Yeah, none of these are bad things. These are just things. These
It,
are just. I mean, these are our
you got to deal with it.
responses.
Yeah.
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 And
Yes.
so that's why I don't. I never say things are good or bad, because situations can change, making them seem better or worse than they are,
And
and
guess
they
what?
could work to your advantage or disadvantage.
And you can't control those things. Those things are
Yeah.
out of your control. Your mom,
Uh-huh.
your biological dad. There was nothing you could
Uh-huh.
do about that. That
Yeah.
happened, and you know, and now we have these wounds, we have these scars, oh,
Mm-hmm.
and that defines us, and that defines us. So you gotta move forward, and sometimes you're a little disfigured, figuratively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
You got to kind of deal with it.
Figuratively, yeah.
Yeah, and then you got to kind of deal
Yeah.
with it. Wow, I'm
And
gonna
I
be
got divorced too.
all right. So been there, done that, doing that. What did that look like?
Yeah. That looked like loss of hair, like losing it in clumps, like embarrassing, kind of embarrassing, because, usually hair marks some sort of like virility or your vitality and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, your people's ability to be attracted to you, to attract a mate and stuff like that. And you feel like a lot of women feel like used goods or something negative after a divorce about the
Well,
way they look and they
100%. You know what it is? You feel like you're a failure. So, and part of that
yeah,
maybe is, figuratively or maybe literally the way you look, that
yeah,
that makes a mark on you.
exactly. And
Wow.
so I wore like hair pieces and wigs figuratively until I decided to go, get help from a doctor, right? That is when I went to therapy and got that to change my mind. And that was really the Rogaine with minoxidil that made my hair grow back, or the biotin
Right, right.
that helped my,
Or the hair transplant. You got a
or
hair
the hair
transplant, and
transplant.
you
Yeah.
know what? Going through those steps, cosmetic
Mhm.
surgery,
Yeah.
and a prosthetic doctor that
Mhm.
I'm taking your situation and what we turned you into, or what you turned you into, where you
Mhm.
are now. I can't believe we're just about out of time.
Already?
Not kidding. Looking right at it.
Wow.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that like jammed through, but I promise you, I'm going to be driving in my car later and thinking about this and all the pieces because it really gives you something to think about. But look what happened from that and that therapy
Yeah.
and what you offer in terms of your mindset coaching, moving your life forward. And I got to tell you this, Anju. Last time we talked, you said, I want to tell my story, the backstory, what happened to me. And I said this last time, I had no idea. I was not prepared for what you were going to tell me. And from that, where you got to where you are now, even, nursing career and what you're doing now, and the combination of all of that and how you moved your life forward and move forward from that disfigurement, if you will,
Yeah. Hmm.
is a testament to you and what you do. And that's, I think that's why you call it ICU-1111, because you had a dream and you had to get it done. I
Hmm.
you stat.
It's a lot of spiritual healing.
Yeah, yeah. We all want it done right away, but it takes
Yeah,
time. It takes
it
time,
does. It's
years.
like incremental changes in habits, changes in ways you view yourself, changes in ways you think about things.
Yep.
All of these things play a part. And then just being really honest, like radically honest about the things that have happened to you, and radically accepting that those things did happen. So now what are you going to do about it? Because
And
that's the only way to resolve them.
there's only one way. And if you go to the, let's say, cosmetic surgeon, even if it's done from your call it that disfigurement of what happened to you in your life, what happens after that? Cosmetic surgeon puts you under the knife. Even if you get the hair transplants, again, we're figuratively speaking, you have to heal from that.
You have to, absolutely. It
Even
takes time. Everything takes
you
time.
you wheel out of the OR, got a brand new face, got what with skin grafts, whatever. It's
Mhm.
not it's got to heal. It's going to take
Mhm.
time. Hair transplants, they don't just put hair in. It's got to grow. So it takes time, even going through the process, talking to even somebody like you.
Mhm. And even when you plant seeds, right? Like to cultivate corn or whatever. Um, Even those take at least 2 weeks for the seeds to emerge from the ground.
Absolutely.
Nothing's immediate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the process. You got to go through it. You got to grow. So we grow from something that was maybe negative or a challenge in our lives. I want to tell everybody if they want to get some coaching, and you got your finger on it, you walk the walk, you talk the talk, you've lived a pretty wild life. Got to tell you that. Like a lot of us look at our lives and like, hey, you know what? That wasn't that great or that. And you rose above it and moved yourself forward to, a beautiful, insightful, amazing person.
Thank you so much. And Jordan Peterson has this great quote that says, um, when you retire, the point isn't to drink margaritas and live on an island by yourself. That won't make you happy. But lifting like a meaningful burden, that will make you happy. So if you realize that these things, these pains that we carry and things like that, we can learn lessons from that. And then we can just look back on our life and say, wow, I got through that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes you realize your own worth. And that's the point. You don't need someone to tell you that. You see it in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Even if you've got scars, literally have scars on you, every scar has a story. And
Hmm.
same thing as we're talking now with the analogy of what you would look like through the emotional wounds, you're gonna have scars. And
Yeah.
scars are beautiful.
Yeah.
We shouldn't look at them as a negative. Website is ICU-1111.com. Free consultation if somebody wants to think about some coaching or kind of move it forward.
Yes. Free 20-minute consultation.
Got it. The doctor is in. The nurse is in, but the doctor is in. She's ready.
Right.
She does cosmetic surgery, she does hair transplants and all of that.
Spiritual. The spiritual
Spiritual.
healer is in.
Exactly. Great talking with you today. And I'm not kidding. I'm going to be sitting in the car later thinking about what I look like. And I think the rest of us should do that because it's kind of an eye opener. Yeah. Cool way to look at life. And
Thank you.
look forward next time we get a chance to talk. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank
Yep.
you so much, Steve.
Be right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network. on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.